This is the 46 of 46 podcast Summit Sessions, where we'll talk all things Adirondack, backcountry, and beyond. From high peak stories and adventures to trail tips and tricks, we'll dive deep into the heart of these mountains and the people who passionately climb them. Adirondack maps and spruce traps, bushwhacks and backpacks. It's all here on the 46 of 46 Summit Sessions. Hey, what's up out there? I am back with a Summit Session this week here on the 46 of 46 podcast. And this week we will not be going to a summit. Rather, we will be traversing the rivers below. My guest this week just completed the Adirondack Canoe Classic, better known as the 90 Miler. And he's here and he's going to take us through the journey with him day by day and tell us the whole story from the paddling to the camping, what he ate. We're going to dive right into it. And for those who aren't familiar with the Adirondack Canoe Classic, which again is better known as the 90 Miler, it is an 80K tradition that dates back over 30 years. It takes place over 3 days in September, where paddlers paddle from Old Forge to Saranac Lake. And this route is the first 90 miles of the Northern Forest Canoe Trail. So basically, day one takes paddlers from Old Forge to Blue Mountain Lake. Day two starts at the Route 30 bridge in Long Lake and goes to the east of Tupper Lake. And then day three, paddling from the notorious Fish Creek Campground and finishing right in downtown Saranac Lake. But my guest tonight is Nick Hall. He's a recent 46er from Ballston Spa, and he's going to tell us the whole story, day by day, as he paddled all 90 miles. Nick, welcome to the 46 of 46 podcast, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to share my journey on my first completion of the 90 miler canoe race.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, first, congrats on your recent 46er finish. That's pretty great.
Thank you.
Very cool. And so, take us through this. So you're really into the outdoors, which I know from us chatting. But what made you decide to do the 90 miler? You said this was a new experience for you.
Yeah. So I've been canoeing here and there for the past few years. I got into that through SUNY Adirondack. And so I've got a friend. His name is Mike. He runs this fantastic little ice cream shop in Ballston Spa called JJ's. And I stopped in one day. We got to talking about some stuff here and there. And he mentioned that he was actually invited to do the 90 miler, but funny enough, his friend bailed on him and he was looking for a new partner. And I said, why not? So about halfway through the summer or so, kind of short notice for something like this, we started about once a week. We would go paddling locally. We would do Round Lake. There's a little stream that feeds into Saratoga called Fish Creek. We would paddle that a couple times a week sometimes. And just to kind of get ready for it. But yeah, leading up to the race, I was kind of nervous. I wasn't expecting, to do super well, to get a really fast time or anything. We were just in it to complete it and all that. And we learned pretty early on logistics was a big challenge we were going to face. Luckily enough for us, the organizers of this race do a very good job, and they set up a canoe shuttle. So we didn't worry too much about shuttling the canoe itself, but more so our cars and everything.
All right,
but yeah.
Sure. So you started paddling with him in the middle of the summer, and before that point, what was the longest paddle that you had done? And then what was the longest paddle that you guys did while you were training for this?
So unfortunately, training wise, we didn't do the best job as far as mileage goes, just because of our time restraints and our schedules didn't always line up for too long amounts of time.
Sure.
But both of us had done various canoe trips in the Adirondacks. He's been up to Maine, I believe, and had done some trips in New Hampshire as well. So over the course of a few days, I have done up to like 20 miles or so. But those are typically, slower, more leisurely paced. I don't think I had done anything more than 10 miles, maybe a little less than that, maybe more in one day. So
sure.
This was definitely a big challenge for us, but
absolutely.
Yeah,
I
him and
love that.
I.
I love
Yeah,
that though. And not to interrupt, but I love that. And I love that your attitude going into this when he asked you was like, yeah, sure. Why not? I'm the same type of person. I'll just do it. Why not? Sounds awesome. I don't care. I'll
exactly.
get ready. I'll get prepared. Yes, I like that. That's what you went into, and you went into it with having never paddled anything remotely as far as this goes. So props to you, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. But yeah, so my friend Mike, he had paddled a couple sections of the actual route a number of times before. I think he had done stretches of Long Lake and through Axton Landing a few times, so he was familiar with that stretch. But neither of us had, together paddled the whole route in its entirety before, so a lot of it was very new to us. So we were going into it really excited to just be a part of this really cool tradition, paddle through some incredibly historic and beautiful waterways that just take you through incredible wilderness. And you just get to be a part of something really fun. And overall, we were going into it with high hopes and low expectations, I should say.
That's great. I mean, at that point, you set yourself up for an adventure, and that's what it's about. And you mentioned before, it wasn't necessarily about getting a good time as much as it's about having a good time. It's not. It's a
Absolutely.
race technically, but I would imagine, and from my understanding, with most of the people who I know, and I grew up around this. This is I've never done it. We were going to do it this year, myself and a buddy, Paul. Paul, I know you're going to listen to this episode. My apologies, but next year we will hit it. I promise you that. But we didn't get to do it. But everyone just kind of does it just to finish. They just want to finish, and it's more about the experience than actually racing, quote unquote.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really fun, accepting community. Like everyone is there to have a good time, even the really competitive racers, and you can tell who they are.
Oh, I
They're
bet.
very supportive. I mean, there were times where we're on the water and we're getting passed on both left and right sides by really intense, groups of paddlers. And, they're yelling back at us, "Hey, good job, 48. Like, nice job." That was our boat number, 48. And yeah, overall, it was a blast.
That's great. I love hearing that it's just like a positive environment to be around. Because you're around a like-minded group of people who are out there doing things. They're out there having a good time. They know it's difficult. That you're right there together, and that's why I always talk about how the outdoors is such an equalizer because and I always say the outdoors, the mountains, the rivers, the woods, they do not care about you. They will hurt you. They will hurt someone with $1 billion in their bank account. It doesn't matter. It is the equalizer. We all know that it's difficult out there to climb a mountain or to do the paddling, and that's why we can actually be real people supporting one another. Oh God, I love the outdoors so much, and I love hearing that was the environment on the water during this race.
Absolutely. Yeah, you had absolutely loved the culture behind it. And being a first timer, it was a little intimidating at first just to see all the people and all these really nice boats. And I'm sitting there with, one of the heaviest boats probably in our class, and just worried about making the time cutoffs for each day. Luckily we did. Um, but yeah, it was a great experience. But yeah, if you'd like, I'd like to start just getting right into the story about the race itself.
Yeah, sure. Before we hop in the race, just real quick, what was the equipment that you guys used, and what did you have in your boats with you?
Okay, yes, yes. So the boat we had, it was a 16-foot Mad River canoe. I believe it's the Mad River Tahoe. It's a big old boat. It probably isn't great for these races, but another thing we got to learn on this trip. Food and water wise, we each had a bag full of various snacks. I had sandwiches each day, peanut butter and jelly. I had some fruit, and and I had a lot of candy
All
uh,
right.
because you can't go wrong with that. It's always a good pick me up when you're feeling down to go in your bag and grab a Snickers or something. So that was great. Uh, as far as water went, I had two Nalgene's with me, both full when I started, of course. And Mike had, he bought this little thing that they were selling. It was kind of, those small igloo jugs,
Sure.
just like water jugs. It was
Yep.
one of those rigged up with the small foam square platform so it could stand up sturdy in the boat. And it also had, think of like surgical tubing inside of it as like a giant straw so he could just sip on it while paddling. and it made it really easy after watching him do that all day long. On day one, I went and bought one of those myself.
Nice.
But yeah, other than that, we both had obviously our life preserves in my dry bag. I had an extra layer just in case it was windy or rainy and all that kind of stuff. And we had our paddles. I think the three paddles we had were all bending branches paddles. And they were very nice paddles to canoe with. I'm glad we had nice light paddles instead of the clunky big plastic ones that we were practicing with all summer long.
Sure. And did you think that it was a good was it a good choice for you two to go in a canoe together as opposed to, maybe two kayaks separately, but like paddling together more or less? Did you like that you guys were a team in the same boat?
Yeah, I think I definitely enjoyed being a part of like a team effort instead of doing it like with someone in a separate boat. I think it kind of just adds a little bit more to the experience. You kind of get to share the suffering a little bit,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
it was a fun time
Awesome.
being with him and having someone to boost me when I was low, because he definitely helped me out a couple sections. I'll explain that in detail in a little
Sure.
bit, but yeah, I'm glad we chose to do it in the same boat.
All right, great. So let's get into it. So day one, you guys get down to Old Forge. You're gonna put your boat in the water. What was it like from the start? And let's go through it. Take us through it.
Yeah, so that morning I woke up pretty early over at the state campgrounds just outside of Old Forge, and immediately I noticed there was a very, very dense fog set in over the whole region. I made a quick breakfast of some egg tacos, some quick, like it was just like scrambled eggs, salsa, what have you. Drove on down and met Mike over at the boat launch, where just about everyone was showing up. There were some vendor tents for people selling merch, some stickers, and some, t-shirts, all that jazz, all that fun stuff. And uh, in front of us is this really dense, like I said, really dense fog setting on the lake, the sun coming up, and it's just gorgeous. Absolute beautiful morning. Everyone's excited. There's a big hustle and bustle around town. Everyone's carrying their boats to the water. We get our boat to the water. I met my friend Michelle, who actually owns the Life in the 80K shop. She helped shuttle my car for day one. So shout out to Michelle for that one. Uh, Check out her shop if you're in Old Forge. It's amazing. But yeah, we put our boat in the water and we were waiting for our wave to get going, and yeah, it was a great morning. We were wave 4, so we were in a non-competitive class, C2 recreation to be exact. And there was a little bit of a delay because of the weather that morning. They wanted to wait for the fog to burn off before all the racers got on the water. um, but yeah, so you start in Old Forge at this little pond just outside of First Lake, and shortly after, I believe it was a little closer to 8:20, the first few waves go off, and it was really cool to be on the water and just see all these people just start rolling their boats. The first class of people, it was the Golden Canoe Club, I believe they call it, and these are all people who amazingly have completed this race over 20 times or more. And that was just really cool to see people continuously coming back that many years to this great tradition. But yeah, so we finally get up to the starting line. They're announcing everyone taking attendance like they do all 3 days, and then suddenly the countdown comes, and I I remember kind of whispering up to Mike, because I'm in the back of the canoe. I was like, "Is it normal to be like nervous for this?" Because I hadn't been a part of something even mildly competitive probably since like high school, so this was like kind of a big deal for me. Besides just doing something competitive for myself, like trying to climb some mountains fast, or like the 46er challenge. This is different than just your normal paddle thing. So I'm a little nervous, but once that countdown finished and we were on the water, there was only one thing left to do, and that was paddle. And that's what we did. So we made our way through First Lake, and we're feeling great. We made our way through Second Lake and Third Lake, and you're paddling the first few hours and most of the first day. You're not really in much wilderness. You're kind of paddling alongside Route 28, But regardless, there's beautiful views along the Fulton chain. Once you get towards like Third Lake and Fourth Lake, you start seeing the Rondack's Fire Tower, and is that Bald Mountain? I believe it's on. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's right there. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so you see the beautiful bluffs of that mountain, and you're paddling on this lake, and the sun's shining, and you're cracking jokes with people passing you, and it's just like I said, like I'll say 1,000 times, it was a great experience. So
Yeah, I can tell by the you have a real what's the word? You I can tell by just the way you're talking about it how you have that high from it, like that it was such a good experience, and I can tell just by how you're explaining what it was like, so that it's showing for sure. Now
I'm definitely getting excited again.
no, that's great. I love that. That's what it's about. Positive activities, positive experiences in the outdoors. Now, how like obvious is I ask people when they're backpacking, how obvious was the trail? How obvious was the route that you guys were paddling?
So the route itself is marked pretty well. It's it's marked with these big like floating buoys every now and then that are put out there to help guide you if you're either obviously too far in front of the pack. Definitely wasn't where we were, but it helped us later on when we were pretty far behind most of the group. But for the most part, if you're middle of the pack, as far as all the racers go, it's very easy to tell where you're going. You can. I don't think there were many times where we didn't see someone in front of us or behind us. So even if it wasn't very well marked, it's pretty straightforward to follow. There were only a couple times throughout the entire race where you kind of had to pay a little bit of attention as far as making certain turns around certain islands, or heading towards certain river openings and whatnot. But for the most part, it was very well marked. The organizers do a great job of maintaining a safe atmosphere so that everyone can feel comfortable and be comfortable both on the water and at the portages as well. So as far as portages go, the first one comes up between Fifth Lake and Sixth Lake, which is right in the town of Inlet. And basically, the first part of this portage, you walk through the town of Inlet, you kind of pass a few gas stations. And the map, according to the map, which I have right out in front of me, and if anyone's following along or wants to follow along, I'll kind of explain a few, key places so you can help see where you are. So there's like a 945-meter portage or portage, however you want to pronounce it. I say portage, between those two lakes. And it's one of the, busier ones. It's pretty early on in the race. So there's a lot of people. You cross a road that's very, very busy because of the amount of people in town because of the race. But it's very well marked. There's people there handing out waters for you, tons of race staff. And it goes by a lot quicker than you think it would. At first, I was kind of not excited about all the portages. Day one actually has 4 different carries you have to do, totaling 3.5 miles.
Wow.
And
Nice.
so, with all that
Yeah.
gear, a big boat, it's kind of, a foreboding kind of daunting task. But we actually at some point we started, looking forward to the portages so that we could get out, stretch our legs, and even eat some food. But yeah, once we jumped into Sixth Lake, and from there we had a decent paddle over to our next big portage, which was a little over a mile, I believe. There's 2 really long portages in this section, and it's the first of the longer ones is Seventh Lake to Eighth Lake, which goes through the Eighth Lake State Campground. And then you quickly paddle across Eighth Lake, or if you're us, it wasn't very quickly. And then you get into a portage that brings you to Brown's Tracks. And this one, it goes through private land. So you can't really have, I believe it's this one that goes through private land. You can't really have your pit crew at that stop just for, private land reasons and all that. But there are people handing out water in case you need that, and pit crews to or there's race staff pit crew to kind of help you out if you need, and people to check you in. And I believe that's where the first cutoff for the day was. And we made that time, I can't remember how long, but we made that by a good amount of time. And by this point in the race, we're starting to feel, a little tired, but, ready for the next section of the race. And yeah, so we continue on to Brown's
How,
Track. And Brown's Track,
I was going to say,
sorry, what
how
was
many
that?
miles in are you at this point into the day? And also, how are you feeling physically? Your arms, your shoulders. How is that feeling, especially with the portages?
So my shoulders at this point were definitely starting to like feel a little bit tired, but not quite as bad as they would later in the race. The portages weren't too bad. The first one was a little tough on the forearms. We didn't quite, carry the canoe over our heads on the first portage. The next two and three portages, actually, the first portage was the only one we kind of didn't get into the groove. We didn't throw the canoe over our heads like the other three, which made it a lot easier. But yeah, and as far as mileage goes, I can't quite. I'm not quite sure as how far we were mileage wise. It was definitely over 10 miles. I think I was about the halfway point of day one. So I want to say between like 15, maybe 16 miles when you get to Brown's Track. So once we put in at Brown's Track, it's kind of funny. You get your first view of the mountain that you finish near, which is Blue Mountain, and you put your boat into Brown's Track looking east, and you just see this small hump over on the horizon. And it's kind of just like, it just diminished me a little bit. I was like, wow, we have to go such a long way.
Oh, I know that feeling.
So, yeah, mentally, I was kind of like starting to go into a little bit of a rut there. But the Browns Track flow itself definitely pulled me out of that. Although it is very, very, excuse me, very, very windy, it is gorgeous. You get nice sweeping marsh views of the area. There's some beautiful crags high up on some of the mountains around you, and like I said, you see Blue Mountain way in the distance. And whether that's like, some sort of motivator to you, or if that's like a little bit of a kick in the gut, either way, you just know you got one thing to do, and that's just to keep on paddling. So that's what we did. And this is where we kind of met up with these two girls. They were from Rochester, and we noticed that we kept a similar pace. We kept passing them, they kept passing us, and we started like making jokes. And Mike and I, my buddy, we to kind of like pull our spirits up, we would sing every now and then when there weren't too many people around us. And I guess they heard us at some point singing some Disney song. And a few minutes later, some guys pass us in a kayak. And the one guy says, he's like, "Are you guys the Disney guys?" And I was like, "Excuse me?" And he goes, some girls back there are saying two guys are singing Disney songs. Are you the Disney guys?"
That's
And
awesome.
Mike and I started laughing. We were like, "Yeah, we're the Disney guys," slightly embarrassed and whatnot. But they were cool. We were just joking and all that. And yeah, so we kept paddling. At this point, you're just about entering Racket Lake after a few windy miles going through Brown's Track. Down there, I was starting to get eaten up pretty bad by these flies. I couldn't tell if they were like deer flies or what, but they looked like small little house flies, and they were just destroying my ankles. It was getting me pretty frustrated. But besides that, my body and physically, I was doing pretty well. So you get into Racket Lake, and this is another big body of water. So you go from little stream paddling to pretty intense lake paddling, depending on weather situations. And luckily for us, the water wasn't too choppy. There were a few times where some boats would come by, and we would get a few wakes here and there. But otherwise, it was just a pretty decent paddle into what is known as the Marion Flow, which brings you from Racket Lake towards another portage. But before we got to that, the third and last, or no, the fourth and last portage of day one, I hit a big wall. I don't know what happened. I felt like every paddle every stroke I was going for was just not moving the boat at all. My arms were starting to kill me. I was, just in a rut. And meanwhile, Mike's in the back of the boat, just, still singing his heart out, trying to pull me out of this, little pit that I'm in. And I can't remember what did it, but, after a few miles of just, being in this really bad place. Some people might know the term pain cave. I'd like to think this is my first time like entering a little pain cave where, there's only one thing to do, and that's just keep moving my arms, keep my head down, and just, keep
Yeah,
going.
that's it. I mean,
But
at this point, what else can you do? The only other option is to quit, and you're not going to quit.
exactly. So, we're thinking we might not make this last cutoff. It's getting pretty late. I think this cutoff point, it was at like 1 o'clock. We had to be at a spot called, I think, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But there's this carry that goes through private property between the Marion River and Udawana Lake. And just before we got there, luckily we made the cutoff. But just before we got there, I kind of started to feel a little bit better. I drank some water. I had a little bit of ibuprofen. I took some of that. I had a Snickers bar. I had some other candy, and maybe it was the sugar high, or maybe it was the fact that we had two more bodies of water to go before we finally saw Blue Mountain and Blue Mountain Lake again. But I got into the zone. My spirits totally flipped. I started singing with Mike again, and we were able to keep our pace, get up to pace again, and really start paddling. And yeah, before we knew it, we were paddling across Udawana Lake, getting into Eagle Lake, and closer to the finish line. And yeah, it was a great last couple hours. The sunset that evening was gorgeous. A classic Adirondack sunset, and it was a mix of excited to be finished with day one, being in this beautiful area, because the Udawana Eagle Lake area is another just beautiful, beautiful area. If you've never been there, if you've never paddled there, and before we knew it, we were turning around a corner, heading towards this finish line, and we could see it. We see the road. We see some people waiting for us. We see Mike's girlfriend waiting on the shore, rooting us on and everything. And it was great to hear those cowbells. And there weren't too many people left at the finish line because we were some of the last few people to paddle in that day. But it was great to see the finish line on day one, and to know, even though we barely did it, we did it. And if we can do day one, we can do day two. And it just got me so excited because I knew it, like, if I could do day one, then this thing's in the
That's
bag.
great. I mean, that's it. If you did it today, so we're going to do it tomorrow, and you have all day to paddle. That's what you're out there to do. You're out there to paddle. And I love that you were saved by a Snickers bar. Man, I tell you, Snickers bars when you're outside in the woods and you're hungry and you need a pick me up, they deliver 100% of the
They
time.
do.
Hungry, why wait? Grab a Snickers. You're not you when you're hungry. This episode is not sponsored by Snickers. I am just a huge, huge fan. But I would accept a Snickers sponsorship for all you Snickers people who are listening. So that sounds like it
They
was
are
a
the
great
best.
day one. So now you mentioned that you were some of the last people to finish. What was the time that you finished?
So day one, we were on the water for 9 hours, and I might be having a slight bit of dyslexia here, remembering this, but it was either 9 hours and 31 minutes or 9 hours and 13
Okay,
minutes.
sure.
Um, but it was either way, it was over 9 hours. We got off the water, I want to say around a little after 5 o'clock, and yeah, it was a long, long day. But after that, that night we camped over at the Lake Eaton campgrounds. So we drove over there. I checked us in, and that's when I realized I actually left my dry bag over where my car was stashed, and which had a number of things in it, including my wallet, unfortunately. Um, but luckily, that was recovered the next day. But yeah, after day one, we were, a mix of tired, slightly delirious from probably the lack of calories throughout the day, and slight dehydration and all that. But we were happy, we were excited, and we were really looking forward to another full day on the water. And that started with Long Lake. And let me tell you, Long Lake is a long, long
Hmm.
lake.
Isn't it 14 miles or 17 miles long, something like that?
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but luckily the race Point starts at a place called Bissell's Landing or Bissell's Field. And this spot is just a couple miles, I want to say maybe a mile and a half, maybe 2 miles from the bridge that goes through the town of Long Lake. So it's not quite the entire length of Long Lake, but it is a good large portion of it.
Yeah, I mean, that whole lake, like the Northville Placid Trail goes along it, and even when you're walking like half of the lake, you're like, this is the longest body of water in the history of planet Earth. And to actually be
Yeah.
paddling the whole thing is you know, I can't even imagine. I've never done it, but I could have somewhat of an understanding as to what you're dealing with here. So now, when you guys camped, so you obviously aren't putting the canoe back in the same spot that you took it out the night before. You kind of start at a different spot.
Yeah. So although the race itself follows sections of the Northern Forest Canoe Trail, it's the race course. It's not one continuous route, so it ends in Blue Mountain Lake and then starts again and at a section on Long Lake. And so you either have to figure out logistics for to shuttle your own canoe to the start of the next day, or you can sign up for their shuttle program that they offer. And pretty much they give you a little sticker to put on the front of your boat with your number, and you leave your canoe at the end of the day in a certain spot. And, the organizers, amazing people, really nice, really good at what they're doing. They have most of the boats cleared out very, very quickly, and all the boats are there ready to go the next day. Um, we never had problems finding our boats, even though there were, dozens and dozens and dozens, hundreds probably, boats. And yeah, so luckily for us, we didn't have to worry too much about boat logistics.
That's great. I mean, that talk about a situation that makes the overall experience even better when it's just like a well-oiled machine, and obviously they've been doing this over 30 years, so they've got the kinks worked out. But yeah, it's fantastic that that's an option for paddlers. Yeah, so day 2, 33 miles, and there's one carry. So let's go. Let's keep going.
Yeah, so the carry that we started looking forward to is a lot farther along in day 2 than any of the carries are in day 1. And like I said, Long Lake, very, very long lake. We started again. There was like a slight weather delay due to fog, but other than that, the water was pretty decent that morning, not too choppy. There wasn't too much wind. Luckily, there wasn't much of a headwind, because that would have made things a whole lot worse for us. Sometimes weather can just come barreling down Long Lake in either direction, and for us that day we had a nice calm weather day, albeit very, very hot. I believe it was 81 degrees or so that day. Not many clouds in the sky, so the sun was just beating down on us most of the day. But yeah, we started off. We had a nice send off at Bissell's field, and we headed north. Again, feeling great. Felt like we were off to a better start than day 1, as far as like getting our cadence down and getting our paddle timing right, and switching at proper times, and staying nice and on course, and all that stuff. So we started off nice and strong. Before long, we're passing the bridge where there's tons of spectators. Everyone's shouting for you. I had some people there. My dad and my girlfriend were there with some signs, and it was a great time. So early on, you get this great morale boost, and then from there, you don't see many people other than racers and race staff pretty much until the end of the day, which you end over 30 miles away at a spot called the Crusher, which is in between Tucker Lake and Saranac on Route 3, I believe. Yeah, Route 3. But yeah, from there we just paddled north, and all day, for the majority of the day, you're paddling down Long Lake. You're just staring at the Seward Range, and it was really cool to just know that I stood up there not too long ago, looking the opposite way down Long Lake, not even knowing that less than a year later I'd be paddling in a race. coming the opposite way. So that was a little cool moment.
Yeah, definitely.
But the view kind of got old quick. Uh, Not that you're not paddling through beautiful areas, but staring at one objective for hours and not seeing it get any closer, it kind of starts to get to your
Yeah,
head,
sure.
and you bring you down a little. So you start focusing on the stuff immediately
Hey,
around you.
nobody's going to hold
And
it against you that after paddling a 14-mile lake, and I just measured it on the map, it is 14 miles. No
mhm.
one's going to hold it against you that you were ready for a slight change of scenery or just something new and fresh. 14 miles, that's a long time with, yeah, exactly, the same
Yeah.
body of water.
Yeah, so it got to a point where instead of staring down at the mountains ahead of us, I was trying to, notice some of the more local things around the boat, whether it was uh, some of the beautiful vegetation underneath the water, or the beautiful shorelines, some of the nice houses, and some of the cool boats and toys that they all had along some of the shorelines, um, and all that. So yeah, it wasn't too bad, but it definitely starts to get to you when you're just realizing you're on the same body of water for so long. But like I said, if you break it down into a multi-day trip, there's a number of campsites on the lake. I'm sure I would have enjoyed the views a lot
Oh,
more
there's like,
if I was able
I
to
think
slow
there's
it
like
down.
5 or 6 lean-tos and campsites on a long lake. I
I
passed
could
passed
say
them
that
on
10
the
times.
Northville Placid Trail. I stayed at one of them, and yeah, there Kelly Point number 2, I think I stayed in. But yeah, the Long Lake is a fantastic just stretch, and yeah, it's the same feeling on the Northville Placid Trail. You're just ready to be past the Long Lake section, as everyone dubs it. But yeah, it is a beautiful spot. It's
Yes,
hard to beat. It's just Long Lake. But then you're also
exactly.
eventually on the Racket River for quite a long time as well. I mean, it's got to be like 10
Yeah.
miles on that, but that winds. It's a little very narrow, and it's probably a lot different every so often there.
Oh yeah, the paddling, as soon as you enter the mouth of the Racket River, it changes completely. I mean, you notice the current right away. You get this big sigh of relief, because it feels like you just start like speeding, like you just hit the speed boost or something. All of a sudden, you get into the river, it narrows down, and you're not worried about just like keeping straight on one course, because now you have to worry about, oh, maybe there's going to be a rock or a stump or a floater or something in the water. And there's countless winds and bends and all these loops and turns on this river. I mean, even just looking at the map, it's hard to really like follow where the river goes. So heading into that area, it's kind of intimidating. But knowing that my friend Mike had paddled this section a number of times, he was very familiar with this area. That kind of put my mind a little bit at ease with all that. Looking at the map, it's very confusing, that area. So it was very nice to know that I had someone in my boat that was comfortable and knowledgeable of the area. But yeah, we made the cutoff at the north end of Long Lake, where there's a safety boat stationed, giving water bottles out to racers. Long Lake's a very long lake, obviously, and most people drink most of their water up before heading into the Racket River. So they just give people a chance to grab a bottle of water or two before heading north, for a nice long paddle to Racket Falls, where you have a nice portage. But before that, it is a good few hours of beautiful wilderness river paddling. On the western shore of the Racket River, for most of the way, is a lot of private property, but to the east, you head towards, the high peaks are way that way. The cold river flows that way. You have more towards the north end is, the Seward Range, the Sawtooth Range to the northeast, and all that. So on that side, it's beautiful public lands, but on the western side, however, like I said, that's all private and that's well marked. But you pass a number of campsites heading up that way, going through gorgeous wilderness. We were doing a lot of we tried to do some bird identifying as we paddled through, but obviously most of our brains were focused on the task at hand, just paddling through the river. And yeah, that section was easily one of my favorites of the whole race. Just being in the middle of that whole area with very few canoers around us at that point because most of the racers had flown by us. I mean, there were times on Long Lake earlier that day where there was like two or three boats either side of us within a couple feet, and they were, excuse me, and they were just like paddling twice, three times our speed. I mean, these people were finishing these stretches of races within like 3-4 hours, I think, or 4 or 5 hours, which was just unbelievable. These racers, it's really really amazing to watch, especially at such a close
Yeah,
range.
certainly. Now, real quick before we keep going, so this is day two. Day one, I didn't catch the mileage here. I didn't catch the mileage for day one, but day two is 33 miles. Now, the most that you've ever paddled in a day was about 10 miles, you said. So yesterday you did more than double that. Now today you're right back on it for a triple amount of miles you've ever done. So physically, were you super sore? Like, take me through that. Like, how were you physically feeling? Because this is all a huge stretch for what you've done in the past.
Yeah, so honestly, physically, I was doing a lot better than I had thought I would be doing. Obviously, at the end of day one, both at night and in the morning when I had woken up, I was very sore and all that. My arms were a little stiff. I drank a lot of water to stay hydrated. I took some, pain meds and stuff, so I could, feel a little bit more comfortable and all that. But within the first hour or so of starting, you get those lactic acids in your muscles kind of moving again, and everything starts to loosen up. And as long as don't push yourself too far past your limits, I was fairly, I wouldn't say comfortable, but I was never like wincing in pain. Besides when I was getting bitten by those pesky flies or whatever, because those followed us halfway through the whole
We've
race.
all been there, that's
Um,
for sure.
yeah, that's like an Adirondack staple. No matter where you go, some sort of flying, biting thing will get you.
All right. So now you had your I guess I mean it's got to be like 10 miles on the Racket River. So you just did your portage and then so that was a nice break for you, a change of pace. You could get out of the boat. You had a 1.25-mile portage. And you mentioned too before, you made the checkpoints and all these things. You may not know the answer to it, but were there a lot of people, or were there people who weren't making checkpoints? I mean, you might not know the answer to that, but was that common, or do you have any idea?
So I think on day one there might have been a couple people who may not have finished or got to the last checkpoint. Um, but honestly, I'm not too sure. I know if you go, and anyone can do this, you can go on the North Forest Canoe Trail website and go to their page that's all about the 90 miler. They do post the race results. So, I mean, you can even go on and see how slow I did it. But yeah, they post all the results. So I believe they will say if there were any DNFs, did not finish folks in
Sure.
there. But so something cool that they do is if for some reason you were unable to finish a certain day, the following day they put you in with the first group, so you get an earlier start.
Cool.
That way you can continue on paddling. You get more time on the water, and you're still included in the race and all that. And yeah, it's a
No,
great
that's
way.
great.
So no one feels
Yeah,
left
and,
out.
and again, I mean, again, this is like some people are racing, but the majority of people are just going on a paddling adventure, and they want to complete this task. So that's great that it doesn't, end your outdoor adventure at that point. That's great. Yeah, they're doing it right from the sounds of it. And I just looked it up. So day one is 34 miles. Day two is
Yeah.
33 miles, meaning day three will be the shortest day. So yeah, day one you crushed it. Day two, you're feeling good as you're moving. So would you say that because day one you ended up hitting that block? Did you have anything like that on day two?
So day two, I had a little bit, definitely not as bad of one, but it was after the Racket Falls carry. Um, shortly after, it was between, I think it was like halfway between Racket Falls and Axton Landing. You're paddling through all these winds and twists and turns in the river, and again, it felt like all my paddle strokes were just had no power behind them, no matter which side I was paddling on, and I kind of just felt like I was slowing us down, and I I don't know. It was weighing on me mentally more so than physically, because I was just like, right now I'm not a good canoe partner, and I don't think we can do this. Maybe I'm in over my head. It just all these bad thoughts coming into my head, and just trying to fight them off, despite me not physically being able to like perform to the level that I want to perform at that specific time. It was just this bad mix of, can I actually do this? Is this too much for me? But eventually, again, Mike was able to pull me out of it. he's one of my favorite partners to, like, whether we're hiking, or I used to help him lead backpacking trips for the SUNY Adirondack Adventure Sports program. And, almost every time something wonky or something funny happens where, we're dealing with a problem and we have to solve it. And he's such a great guy to be with when there's something bad going on, whether it's bad weather and you just have to be in good spirits, or whether a handful of students just got stung by ground wasps in the backcountry, and you have to handle that whole situation. So it really is about mindset and who you're with in those bad times, when you're doing something and the times get tough. You need to dig within yourself, but you also need someone who can push you to be a good partner.
I love that. That's what it's all about. You have to overcome those demons in your head, and it sounds like he was there to help you do that, and that's what it's all about. Because I mean, this is not for everyone. This is a difficult task you're doing. I mean, you're paddling 90 miles in 3 days, 33 miles today. Like, most people will go through their entire life never paddling 33 miles, period, let alone in one day, let alone back to back to back. So I mean, it is that type of activity. That's what's happening, and you overcame, and you didn't quit, and you were able to grind it out, build some grit. So that's a great thing.
Yeah, and it definitely helps build character. And once you go through those little stages, and then come out on the other side of it, accomplished, you feel so much better uh, about what you did. And it felt great for me. It added to the adventure. It made it more memorable. And yeah, from there, I was ready to finish the race. Looking at the map, it looks like you're kind of close, but if you think the stretch you just did was windy, then you're in for a rude awakening, because the Racket River between Axton Landing and the finish at the Crusher is
Yeah, I'm looking
mind-boggling.
at the map right
It,
now.
it's
It's all over the place.
it's inconceivable how many turns and twists and bends there are, and it's
And they
fun.
had it marked accordingly. Like I mean, obviously it's confusing, but was it able? You were able to follow it okay without going the wrong way.
Yeah, yeah. So there's actually I think you're actually allowed to drive like motorboats to a certain level, um, like certain power level into that area. And so there are markers for the route that they have to follow, because in some areas it gets pretty shallow, very weedy. Some spots there's like strainers or big trees falling over the river. So in order to like guide the actual like motor watercraft, they have buoys along that whole area. So despite how windy it is, and how many like small little oxbow lakes that you can pass and get into, um, it's pretty well marked. So
Well, that's good.
even if for some reason someone didn't have a map, or they were paddling on their own in between race packs, it's fairly easy to
Hmm.
follow, which is
Were there
helpful.
any times as you mentioned on this river, once you got into the Racket River, like, it felt like you had speed boosters put onto your boat. Were there any times where the water was flowing fast and you were, maybe somewhat nervous at that moment, or was it all relatively calm for the most part?
It was all relatively calm. There were no I think on day 3 there were a couple spots where there's a little bit of like, I wouldn't even say swift water, but there's like pinches in between, like build up of debris in the river where you kind of just like slip through. But there was never any like swift or even rapid water. It was more so just like a calm river current. Um, think of just like moving flat
Yeah,
water.
a nice gentle river flow. That's what's up.
Yeah, on a normal day, it would be the perfect place to paddle. And not that it's not the perfect place to paddle, but again, it's one of those places that I'm really excited to revisit on a more leisurely recreational trip.
So then you eventually made it to the Crusher. You finished day 2. You finished the windy maze that is the end of that river. And how were you feeling when you
Yes,
guys crossed the finish line on day 2?
we were excited yet again. We were very, very hungry. I think the last few miles we were, dreaming about our perfect burger that we could order if we had endless
Oh
toppings.
yeah,
Uh,
speaking my
and so
language now.
exactly. You know how it gets when you're on those long hikes or anything, and that's the only thing that's driving you to the finish line. So we were definitely just very, very hungry. We were tired, but overall we felt very accomplished and excited. And looking at the mileage for day 3, those sweet 22 miles and only zero point 0.6 miles total in carries, we were excited because we knew at this point we were going to do it. We
Absolutely.
were 100% going to finish the race and get that little red
There it
pin.
is. It's about that red pin. Now we can't move on without you telling us what was your burger of choice that you guys were
Oh,
dreaming about. Take us through what your perfect burger was at the end of day 2 on the 90 miler. Like, take us through that. It's very important.
all right. All right. So he was a little disappointed in my choice because despite the fact that he said I had an endless amount of possibilities, I kind of stayed kind of close to home and just went with something really, really classic. And I said, I just want a double patty bacon cheeseburger with orange cheddar cheese, cooked medium rare, um, with lettuce, tomato, onion, pickle, and drizzled in A1 steak sauce with a side of nice crispy fries.
There it is. I
So,
mean, I need that right now, and I didn't even just do any paddling. Now, I mean, I wouldn't. When you said, when you said that he was disappointed because you had all the toppings, I'm thinking you're gonna say, "Don't tell me you're just having a plain cheeseburger." I would be
no,
so
no,
disappointed. But I respect your choices. I think that they are classic, but they're not too vanilla. I think they are. I think they're right on the money. I would add a couple things, but overall, I respect the choice. I respect the choice.
thank you. I appreciate that.
So then day 2, where'd you guys camp?
Day 2, so we camped at Fish Creek Ponds campsite,
Perfect.
and a little busy that night. We were camped next to some slightly rowdy folks. Not too bad. They were just, sound carries at
Oh, it
at that
does. I mean, it's
campground.
probably the most. I mean, I have no idea, no basis for this, but at least around here, like it's the campground. Like it's probably the most stayed at campground in the park, or at least in the High Peaks region. Fish Creek is just kind of that legendary spot that you just can't ever get a campsite at because they're always so booked. But yeah, that's not surprising.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so we had some rowdy neighbors, but once that, it was funny. They were pretty loud all night. They sang "Happy Birthday," like belted it at the top of their lungs at one point, which was pretty fun. But almost on the dot because there's like a sound curfew. Um, Sound ordinance or whatever, almost on the dot at like 10 p.m. They just turned off as if someone hit the mute button. So it was pretty neat that, despite the fact that they were having a lot of fun and, being noisy, and they were able to respect the time restraints and all that. And I was able to get some sleep that
That's
evening.
good. Yes, that is very important. Very cool. So at the end of day 2, you obviously mentally are like, this is in the bag. Tomorrow's significantly shorter, basically 2/3 of what you've done the last 2 days. There's 3 portages. They're all super short. So you're feeling good mentally and physically. You're feeling good, or are you starting to feel the wear and tear? How are we feeling when you go to bed that night, and then when you woke up in the morning?
So going to bed that night, I was definitely feeling the mileage from the past 2 days. Like you said, this combined already has been um, multiple times more mileage than I've ever done in a single day. So I'm definitely feeling it in my legs, oddly enough, because of just sitting in that position all day. I'm feeling it in my back and my shoulders. And, I was doing some stretches, some like shoulder rolls and some, arm circles and that to kind of stay loose, stay able to like, keep my arms going for the amount of hours that I needed them to. And overall, I was just trying to keep them in good shape just to finish up for the race. And luckily, I was able to do so. I never felt like I was in too much pain that, my muscles were too strained that I shouldn't do this. I never felt at risk of like injury or anything. So I was definitely past my comfort level, but not too far past that, which was fun. But yeah, day 3, the final day, 22 miles, starts in the Narrow Arrows area of Fish Creek Ponds, and very busy area because of all the campers. Uh, if you plan on doing this race, you definitely want to get a campground close to where the race is going to start, so that you don't have to, park and walk all the way to like the start of the race. It's kind of a nightmare. It's like bumper to bumper traffic getting into the start. But anyways, the countdown for day 3 goes off. Mike and I are just elated to be on the water, starting the final day, knowing that we're only a handful of hours away from, pulling up to the town of Saranac Lake in our boat, just happy to be done. And then we were off. So we start paddling through the narrows of Fish Creek Pond. There's a little bridge area pretty early on day 3 where there's a bunch of spectators cheering you on. But shortly after that, you turn into Upper Saranac Lake and start paddling south. And that's when you start getting some beautiful views of the surrounding areas, all the islands in the Saranac, the 3 Saranac lakes, upper, middle, and lower. There's tons of little islands, like I don't even know how many campsites. I think hundreds between all those lakes. I know on my map I see campsite 87 right here, so that to put that into perspective. But just a massive area to explore. So we're paddling through there, just in awe of the beautiful, scenery around us, and just paddling this open water. And day 2 started. We were feeling really good. A little sore at first, but like I said, after an hour or so, you start to loosen up and get into the rhythm of things again. And we were going and we were feeling pretty good. I don't think I hit too much of a rut that day, mainly because of the lower mileage. I was a lot more prepared on the 3rd day. I mean, each day I was learning something else that I should or shouldn't do, or something that I should do more efficiently to, make us function as a well-oiled machine.
And
so
what are those things?
but
Share that wisdom with listeners. What are those things that you learned throughout the trip that you should or should not do?
Yeah, so you 100% want to have some sort of hands-free water device. I'm personally, have never been a huge fan of like Camelback. So just because they happen to always taste weird for me, they have a plasticky taste, in my opinion. But if you like those, albeit you should have that. Some sort of hands-free water device. It's something you need. Especially if you're a paddler in the rear, because you do all the steering. I found out the hard way on day 1, like if I needed to drink some water, it would throw us off course almost immediately. So I was a little underhydrated for most of the day on day 1, just because it was hard for me to find time to drink enough water without throwing us off course. Another thing is you definitely want to have the right size paddle for you. You can do a quick Google search to various websites that'll help you find the right paddle for your body height and all that. I definitely realized that I probably should have had a shorter paddle for my body height, just because I was over exerting my body in order to get the paddle fully out of the water. And overall, that definitely caused a little bit of extra strain on me. We probably could have used a lighter boat and a better shaped boat as well, amongst other things. And then another thing you want is, as far as food goes, you want to have things that are really light and easy to like eat. So a lot of people had, if you know those like energy goos, a lot of people had those. A lot of people just had like things taped like to the insides of their boats so they could just pull them off and eat it real quick. So anything that makes drinking water or eating food as quick and as efficient as possible is what you want, because almost for the same reasons as drinking water, eating food is very difficult in the boat, because it just like it throws your cadence off with your partner. It slows you down, and it's just it's kind of just a headache. So I learned a lot.
That's great. Those are all
Yeah.
definitely good things to learn, good things to share with anyone who may tackle such an adventure like this. Those are all very good things that you learned in the moment. So very cool. So you're
Yeah.
paddling your way through the Upper Saranac, headed towards the Bartlett Carry, which is the first carry of the day before getting to the Middle Saranac. How we feeling?
We're feeling good. We're feeling excited. We heard in doing our research that at the Bartlett Carry, there's a very nice gentleman who sits around halfway through the carry playing the bagpipe to kind of encourage the racers, one last hurrah before the second half of the last day. I believe the second half of the last day, or for my sake, I'm going to call it that. Because that's what it felt like to me. After the Bartlett Carry, everything kind of started speeding up for me. I started to get more and more excited that we were going to finish, and we just finished that portage, with the beautiful music blasting through our ears, and jumped right into Middle Saranac Lake, and then once again we were off, heading east, I believe. Yes, heading east northeast into Middle Saranac Lake, and what you pass this point just before a spot called Plymouth Rock on Middle Saranac Lake, where you kind of come around this bend and start looking east, and the views just open up, and you're greeted with, I believe we saw Whiteface amongst some other mountains, to name a few. I think the Mackenzie Mountain Range, and some of the other mountains to the east, and I was just in awe. I was not expecting that view when we came around the corner. I had never paddled in this area before, so most, if not all, of the scenery was just foreign to me. So I was just floored when I saw that view. We have this open lake, and we see all the paddlers in front of us, and we were just charging, or trying to charge towards that objective of the Saranac River. So yeah, we, inspired by those mountains, we started paddling towards the Saranac River, and I always felt like I would start to feel more physically strained when we were paddling through open water. Maybe it was the choppiness on some of the lakes, or maybe it was something else that I'm not too sure of. But I always felt like I was trying harder, or that I had to try harder to keep a good pace when you're out in the middle of a big lake like that. So I was pretty eager to get into the Saranac River. I'm definitely a bigger fan of river paddling than open water paddling. So I definitely realized that was a strong suit of mine. So we headed towards the Saranac River, and I believe, uh, yeah, about halfway through this first section, you pass through the upper locks, and I believe most people, they can do, it's like a hand operated lock, and there's like a lock tender who will they'll help you cross the locks in a way that's like really historic and really cool. Um, I'm not sure if everyone knows how these canal locks work, but they you paddle into it and it fills up with water to the level of the next body of water, and then a little door opens and you kind of paddle right through. And it's just a really unique thing to see when you're out in the wilderness like that. But for the race, obviously for time's sake and all that, you don't really have to do that, and actually nobody does. So you kind of just pick up your boat, walk it a couple yards, and drop it in to the other side, and then you keep on paddling. And it's a few windy turns after there, and then you're paddling into the mouth of Lower Saranac Lake. So from there, you're just paddling through slight open water. It's a little more narrow than the Middle Saranac Lake, and there's a lot more islands. And the views on these islands are just gorgeous. It's a lot different than some of the other river and lake paddling I've done. A lot of the islands have all these really cool like rock bluffs and cliffs on them, and it just seems like such a cool place to be. And it was definitely one of those times where, although I was really glad to be participating in the race, I wish I was there while not racing, just so I could really explore, like, Bluff Island, some of the campsites on like Pope Bay Tongue and all that.
I would say that 90%, probably 90% of my paddling in my whole life has been all over Lower Saranac. Like that's where we always would go. That's where I've been so many times via kayak or canoe. It's a great spot with all the islands, with everything. Like, yeah, it's a really fun time. So if you are going to paddle up here, that's a great place to go, the Lower Saranac in particular. Now, did you jump off Bluff when you passed Bluff? Please tell me you did with the canoe.
Now, no, although it was really, really hot and I wish we had time, we were not able to jump off Bluff. It was funny all trip, the whole weekend. My buddy Mike kept telling me, and other people, he was like, it's torturous being out here on the water underneath the sun and not being able to be in the water. We're paddling through it, but we never once jumped in to cool ourselves down. Now, if we were one of those racers who could finish well before all the cutoffs, maybe we would have thought about it a little more. But unfortunately for us, we're gonna have to try another time to schedule some time in for a little cliff jump.
Yeah, dude, it's cool. So if you guys aren't familiar, Bluff is there's Bluff Island out there, but there's like a huge cliff jump. I don't know how high up it is, but it's big.
Someone said 75 feet when we were paddling past it, and I don't doubt that.
Yeah, when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, that is massive. Now, quick story. I remember, so we were in high school, just some various friends of mine. We were out paddling here in the Lower Saranaks, and our friend Brittany, who is just a fearless type of girl. She absolutely fearless. So we're all paddling over there. We're like, oh, man, Bluff, look at that. It's so big. And we're like sitting in the water kind of debating if we're going to jump, and she had already taken off without us realizing it, and she just climbed up and just no question, no pause, no hesitation, just boom, jumped it. And it was this epic moment. But still to this day, I'm 36 years old, so high school was quite some time ago. Still to this day, I'll get a random text that just says, remember when Brittany jumped off Bluff? Yeah, it's really high. It's cool. I mean, I'm not going to do it. It's not for me, but for all you really adventurous types, add it to your list.
Yeah, it definitely looks like an adrenaline junkie's paradise.
100%. That's what that is. Because it's not just like you go to Split Rock or you go to these other places where it's like, you have some 10-foot drops, some 15-foot drops. That's a straight cliff. That's what that is. Hilarious. Yeah. But anyways, continue. So you didn't jump off Bluff.
Unfortunately, we did not jump off Bluff, but we hung a right at Bluff Island, headed between some narrows and what looks like an island. Maybe it's a little isthmus kind of thing, but headed towards First Pond, where you get to another bridge crossing where we had more spectators waiting for us and hooting and hollering and encouraging us, which was a great thing to see. No matter where you were in the race, no matter where you were mentally or physically, whenever you saw a stranger or, another racer and they, gave you a little boost or little words of encouragement, like no matter how small or how quick, it does wonders, for your morale, for your energy and all that stuff. So seeing that bridge crossing at Route 3 and people yelling at us that there's only a handful more miles to go, we were we were motivated, we were energized, and we were ready to keep paddling. So we passed there. We headed towards Second Pond into narrow river paddling, which is gorgeous. Again, I'll say that 1,000 times. It's hard to put into words just how pretty paddling through these areas are if you haven't paddled through them. But just you're paddling through this nice, easy, flat water, almost river system, very narrow on both sides with crystal clear water. And there's these really long grassy vegetation underneath your boat, and it's flowing with the current, and it looks frozen, but you can tell it's like moving underneath the water, and it's really cool. And there's all these trees downed, and you can tell that like when it's high water, you can almost paddle through the trees, and it's just you know a really cool, unique area to be. If you've never been there, I think it should be on everybody's bucket list.
You're also surrounded by mountains in this area in particular too, which is always a nice view.
Oh yeah, always. So you keep paddling through there, and then you get to the last carry, which is around the lower locks, which again is another one of those hand operated locks right there that allows boats through. And then you are onto Ostiha. I think I pronounced that correctly. Ostiha Lake.
Osita.
Um,
Osita. Yep.
Osita, Osita. Oh dang.
Osita Lake.
Well,
Yep.
Osita Lake. So you paddle up through there. You paddle in northeast. You don't paddle through too much open water. There's a little bit of islands here and there that keeps the waterway slightly narrow, so it doesn't ever get like too windy, too choppy. At least from what I paddled. And then it's a few turns, and then you're at a straightaway that heads into Lake Flower, and you just feel like you're getting closer and
Yeah, home
closer.
stretch.
Um, yeah, and at this point, my arms are definitely hurting just because I'm paddling extra hard, trying to get to the finish. I'm starting to get a few cramps here and there, but the pain is kind of an encouragement in and of itself. Mike and I are talking about how we're actually about to finish this thing. No matter how far away it always felt, like all of a sudden now it's like within arm's reach, and we were more motivated than ever. And funny enough, there were these two people in pirate costumes, the best dressed people on the whole trip. These two folks in pirate costumes paddling right in front of us. And although we never caught up to them, those were our last two motivators for the trip. We were in our heads, we were like, we just have to catch them. If we try our hardest to catch them, then that's good enough. So behind them, as best as we could, we paddled, and eventually we finished. The whole town of Saranac, it felt like, is just hanging out at the waterfront park. It's like a big party. I think they said this year was like a bigger celebration at the finish than most years. They had like a beer tent. They were selling a whole bunch of merchandise. There were a whole bunch of other like vendor booths there, giving out merchandise and doing little competitions. There was like a NRS bag toss, and it was just such a fun, exciting environment to finish at this race at. You paddle into town, and all of a sudden you're ready to celebrate with everyone else who had just paddled.
Yeah, and
So
you're in downtown Saranac Lake, so the party's happening at that point. So it's definitely a good spot to finish.
yeah, and it was, everyone there is congratulating you, whether it was your friends and family that came to watch you, or strangers that have just been hanging out in the finish line watching people cross for the last few hours. But everyone's there giving a pat on the back and just saying congratulations, round of applause, for the first place finish all the way to the last place. Because at that point, it's like, no one's coming in last, really. It doesn't, no one cares like what place you come in. Everyone is there to finish and celebrate. And yeah, it was great. Shortly after we finished, my buddy Mike and I, we went and grabbed a beer because, it's not over until the beers go clink, as the saying goes.
All right. Now, did you get the double bacon cheddar cheeseburger though?
Unfortunately, that night I did not, but I did.
What was the post canoe meal?
What was the meal? It was we went to the Blue Line Brewery, I believe, because the vendor lines were way too long at the time, and I was way too hungry to wait. So we went to the Blue Line Brewery, which is right down the road. And I think it was like buffalo chicken
All
sandwich.
right.
Actually, it didn't quite fill the void of,
Oh,
but it was enough.
okay.
I think that's what it was. I can't remember. It wasn't as satisfying as the burger, but it was definitely good enough for the time
Sure.
being.
The reason I like to ask these questions is because I get so many messages from people on the podcast who love when I talk about like eating a Summit sandwich or talk about having a Stewart's milkshake at the end because they're all like, I can relate so hard to those moments when I'm hiking, and like, who can't relate to the post hike or post adventure meal? I mean, everyone knows that the hunger that exists. So that's why I like to ask.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something that I immediately related to when I first listened to your podcast, especially, I think you hit home with most viewers with the Stewart's milkshake. I mean, how could you not?
Absolutely.
It's right there almost every time you're leaving town, and
And it hits
you have to
hard in
use.
that moment. I mean, it really does. The salt, the sugar, the taste, the cold, it really nails
Mhm.
it. So you'll be back next year, I'm going to assume.
I really hope so. So I'll be back, hopefully, but hopefully the boat I used will not be. I think that's one of the big upgrades that I would like to make is a quicker and lighter
Sure.
boat.
No, that's all lessons learned from being
Oh,
on the water.
absolutely.
Congrats on finishing. I mean, that was an awesome story. It was I've really felt like I was going through the map as well while you were telling the story, so it was really fun to visualize everything you're talking about. So, congratulations to you for jumping into something that you had, from what most people would say, no business doing, but you just did it. And that's what I love, dude. Those types of stories get me so fired up and psyched. Like, you had paddled 10 miles was the most you've ever paddled. And you're like, nope, I'm going to go paddle 90 in 3 days. Watch me. And you did. And you wanted to quit in certain moments, but you didn't. You wouldn't let yourself go down those paths. You didn't know, you were doubting yourself. And yet, look, you went to the finish line, and now you just have a glow about you, about the experience. And I know that mental barrier that you broke through is clearly a big part of it, as well as the physical activity and the physical triumph that you did. So congratulations. You did a great job. The story was awesome. I felt like you hit everything we had talked about, and that's it's exciting.
Yeah, thanks. And one last fun fact, and it's something I didn't realize until just about finishing the finish line. So I'm paddling just about to the finish, and my mom is standing there on the shore, and she's shouting something to me. And at first, I couldn't quite make it out, but then I hear her say something about 46er. And the day that we finished the race was the year to the day anniversary of me finishing my 46er as well. So maybe it's just something about the September era that makes you want to challenge myself. But it was just a cool little thing that I also finished this big other challenge that I put against myself a
I
year
love
later.
it, dude. I love that. That gets me so psyched. I might flip my own table right now. That's great. I love that. Cool, man. Well, I want to hit you with these final questions. I like to always talk to people about what is something fun and unique that you always have in your backpack, whether you're hiking, you're outdoors, you're paddling. What's something fun that you always need to have?
So it might not, yeah, something fun that I always have with me on my hiking pack. It's actually a little piece of trail booty I found one time when I was hiking out in Colorado. So my buddies and I went to go hike up Mount Elbert, and at the little trailhead, there was this little keychain on the ground, and it looked homemade. It was a few like blocks and like painted shapes and stuff. And I thought it looked cool, so I put it on my backpack. And although a few pieces have fallen off over the years, it's stayed on my main hiking pack ever since I found it. So it's definitely something unique that I've always had with me.
Very cool. Now, question number two: what do you find to be unique about the Adirondacks? Why do you obviously come up here all the time? Why do you come up to this place?
Besides just how gorgeous the scenery is, whether you're looking at the mountains from down low or looking off them from on high. I think what's so unique about the Adirondacks is really how wild and rugged they are. Um, because I've hiked in other places around the country, and I've had friends who've even hiked in other places in the Northeast. And when we compare, notes about the trails themselves, I mean, there's nothing like the Adirondacks. The ruggedness, the dirtiness, just the overall difficulty of the Adirondacks is just what keeps me coming back for
Very
more.
cool. And now you've expanded your activities up here by adding these paddling adventures to it, which is awesome. And final question, why do you hike? Why do you paddle? Why do you enjoy the outdoors? What is it about the outdoors that keeps you coming back for more?
Honestly, I don't know. It's a little bit of everything. There's just something about being in the wilderness and reconnecting with these like primal emotions and feelings of just being amongst these massive forests or in these wild mountains that just makes you feel, it's fun challenging myself and pushing my friends and other people to like do things that they never thought they could do, or overcome fears and such things. I just think being in the mountains is just, it just feels like home.
That's it. I would have to agree with you there, Nick. Where can people find you online if they want to talk to you about this?
So I'm on Instagram at The Dirty Traveler, all one word, all lowercase. And that's pretty much it, actually. I don't use many other social media forms.
Yeah, that's all that really matters these days, it seems like. Well, that's a great place to wrap it up. Nick, thanks so much for coming on the show. That was an awesome story. Congratulations on both your recent 46er finish last year and now your 90-miler finish 1 year to the day. Very exciting stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I felt like we were right there in the boat with him. If you didn't follow along on the map and you listen to the episode, you could definitely go back and listen with the map. It really brings it to life as you hear what he's talking about and you visualize and see all the things on the map that he's discussing. But that's going to do it on the 46 of 46 podcast. Thanks again for listening to this summit session. Check out 46of46.com. I have lots of stuff offered there, from an ebook to guiding services, blogs, and much more. Check back on Fridays for new mountains, new stories, new guests, and new episodes right here on the 46 of 46 podcast. Remember to always leave no trace, do the rock walk, and if you carry it in, carry it out. And if you're in life and you ever want to quit, just keep on paddling. Mr. Nick Hall, keep on paddling, brother. See you on the trails, everybody.